on the video. They're not that good. There's a theme of these little kids' Easter riddles. Where does the Easter bunny eat breakfast?
What?
IHOP. Okay, so that's kind of the theme.
This is the bar, the level of the
Kind of
bar.
on that theme. What is the Easter bunny's favorite kind of music?
Hip-hop.
Yes. Okay, excellent. And one more on that theme. Where does the Easter bunny study medicine? Yes, very good. John Hopkins. Okay. All right, a whole new theme on this one. What happened to the Easter bunny who misbehaved at school? He was expelled. Expelled. Get it? Expelled. Okay. All right, okay, that's the theme. Okay, what do you call an Easter bunny who's really smart? Egghead, yes, okay. And where does the Easter bunny get his eggs? From eggplants. All right, this is the last little sequence. How did the soggy Easter bunny dry himself off? With a hairdryer. Okay. Now, how do bunnies stay in shape? Oh, that was just as good, but that's not what they have. They have aerobics. I think exercise was better. Okay, the last one. What do you call 10 rabbits marching backwards?
Proceeding airline.
There it is. The airline. That was my favorite. I like that. Thank you. All right. Easter is one of my favorite services of the year because it's such a powerful message. Really, it's a message for all through the year and for any day of our lives, and particularly for times when we are feeling a sense of struggle or deadness or needing renewal or resurrection. Because it's all about the resurrection principle of life and the resurrecting power of God at work in our midst, in our lives, in our minds, our bodies, our spirits, all the time. I love this little quote. I've used it, I think, many years on Easter. It's from a writer named Mali Fumiya. If we look more closely into life, we will find that resurrection is more than hope. It is our experience. The return to life from death is something we understand at our innermost depths, something we feel on the surface of our skin. We have come back to life not only when we start to shake off a shroud of sorrow that has bound us, but when we begin to believe in all that is still endlessly possible. I love that last phrase. I took that as my title, endless possibilities. When we begin to reclaim that sense of great possibilities because we don't know the limits of what's possible in this God-infused universe, that's when we feel that resurrecting power of God at work within us. Easter is a perfect time to remember that in this God-infused world we live in, the universe we live in, this God-infused energy in us, all things are possible. That energy can re-enliven us at any time, no matter what. The scriptures, and Linda read one from the Daily Word today, the Easter stories are all about this resurrecting power, the great mystery of it, the supernatural energy of it. The gospel accounts, there are little differences between them, but they all involve going to this tomb and finding it empty. A stone was rolled away and it was mysteriously empty. In one scripture there's an angelic presence, in another there are guards on duty, but always the mystery that Christ has risen. The tomb is empty. The tomb is empty. And then there are the appearances of Jesus to his disciples. They see him even after death. The scriptures are all about this resurrecting power that God makes possible, that is in us, that is in our world, that infuses our universe. It relates to our lives, and I think we forget that sometimes. This Easter story relates to our lives day by day. We too have trials. We too have times when we feel we need to be brought back to life, when things seem kind of lifeless and hopeless. And we need to feel that resurrecting power at work in our lives. And it's there. We have all experienced it more than once. If we had a discussion about this afterwards, I bet we would all have stories to share of how somehow or other, we were brought back from a dark place by the power of God at work in our lives. There are wonderful stories about this all around us. And one of the key things about this resurrecting energy is it works better when we believe in it, when we are on the alert for it, when our antennae are up and we're looking for it, when we're calling upon God for that resurrecting energy to flow through us and we're ready to receive it. Jesus said all things are possible for the one who believes. I stumbled on this quote from Carl Jung, the noted psychologist and really a deeply spiritual psychologist at that. He said we are psychic beings, which we might call mental spiritual beings, not just physical beings. And he said because of that, we're not completely subject to the powers of annihilation. Our totality reaches beyond the barrier of space and time. And the better we understand the archetype of resurrection, the more we participate in its life. I find that a powerful idea. The more we're aware of this resurrecting power at work in us, around us, in our world, the more we participate in its life, the more open we are to it. I was remembering, as I was thinking about resurrection stories and famous people, or people I've known, I was remembering a wonderful interview I heard with Mark Nepo. Some of you probably read Mark Nepo. He's got a number of books, powerful spiritual books. At one time he was just really a poet and not as nearly as well known. But then some 26, 27 years ago, he had cancer. He discovered this huge growth on the back of his head. He was so unaccustomed to being ill, he'd never been ill, that he let it go until it was quite large, which is something I understand. It happens to a lot of people who have been healthy their whole lives and something happens and they have to deal with it. So he went through a door and he talked about how when he went through that door, came out the door of the doctor's office with a cancer diagnosis, it was a total life change. He went out the door a different person and was never able to go back in and who he was before. What ensued then was a time of very familiar for a lot of people who have been dealing with cancer, chemo treatments and radiation and a long journey through that illness. But what he discovered, he said, no experience is wasted. God is there when times are good as well as when times are bad. As he began to come out of that time period, he came out with a great deal of insight to share with others. His writing changed. He wasn't writing poetry for the few anymore. He was writing deeper poetry, but also deeper spiritual guidance literature for people digging deeper, looking for pathways through life toward greater joy, greater fulfillment. His life changed. He became better known. He wrote many, many books. His most recent is Exquisite Risk, I think. It's amazing what happened. And this is what he said about his key insight of going through cancer. He said, whatever opens us, the cancer, the injury, the loss, whatever opens us is not as important as what it opens within us. I find that idea with a lot of depth to it, to reflect on. That's the resurrection principle at work. He understands that. He's got that by heart. There is something that opens within us. If we can trust in it, believe in it, is there something opening up in me? Some new possibilities, some new guidance, some new power coming into me? That's the resurrection principle at work. And it comes direct from God. And it is available to us all. I was struck by this. I was reading a story online about a homeless artist in Florida. Some of you might have caught the same news coverage. He's been in a lot of news feeds recently. But he went through his name is John Masters, and he lives in Pensacola, Florida. But he went through a terrible time. He has he has seizures, and he has a therapy dog named Sheba who alerts him to when those are coming on. He came, I would think, close to feeling desperate at one time. He had been in New Orleans and had managed to scrape together enough to live on a very used and beat-up old sailboat. It had to be bailed out every 24 hours, but that's where he lived, he and Sheba. And then everything went haywire. He was on a beach one day, and law enforcement gave him a hard time about having a dog on the beach. It was a misunderstanding about how it was a therapy dog and so on. He got put in jail for a couple of weeks. He couldn't bail the boat out while he was in jail, and it sank. And the dog was taken into the Humane Society. Before the 2 weeks was up, apparently they went to the county shelter, but then apparently the Humane Society picked up the dog for the last several days of his 2-week jail term. So he did get his dog back, but he lost everything. And then somehow it got it back. It's just kind of amazing. He put up a sign one day. While he had been in New Orleans, he had studied a little bit of art, got a little buzz over here somewhere, Mike, thank you. And kind of taught himself some YouTube clips, some books, little natural talent. He had begun to do some art, but he thought, I'm going to try, see what I can do with this gift of mine. The idea came, where does that come from, these ideas? He put up a sign one day, just need a little help. And he got about $40 from donations, and he bought some paint supplies, and he started painting, and people started buying them on the street. And sometimes people would drop off some new paints, or drop off some canvases, things like that, and he began to do kind of a hopping business of selling his paintings as quickly as he could paint them, with Shiva at his side on the streets in Pensacola. One local man one day came by. He ran a flea market some distance away, where they had art booths and things like that, and said, would you like to come out and sell your paintings on Saturday at the flea market? And he said, sure. And that local gentleman even picked him up on his way on Saturday and set him up in a booth where John Masters said, aren't I hoity-toity now? Come up in the world a little bit. And what he said he enjoyed the most about this improvement in his life is that he said other homeless guys come up to me now to check out what's going on. They're hearing about my story from other homeless people, and they're trying to figure out what they can do that's similar. He said, that's what I enjoy the most. I'm actually able to inspire others. Whoa, from nothing, in jail, complete loss, having nothing, to hoity-toity artist. He gets the resurrection principle. Here's what I was struck by, was that he never let this completely bring him into despair. He said, nothing bad really happens. That's what I believe. It's just that not enough time has gone by to find out what the good that will come of the situation will be. He understands sometimes it takes a little time, and he does not give up hope. That's believing in the resurrection principle and being ready for it, being alert for it, ready for it to flow through us. I think that belief helped in his resurrection, don't you? That he was ready and believing in it and ready to receive it. Sometimes we can get so down by circumstances that our heads aren't even up. We can't believe it, that anything's going to be on offer ever again. We're not looking anymore. Our antennae aren't up. He was ready. He knew that resurrection principle was likely to occur, and he was ready and waiting for it. I think that's kind of what Carl Jung meant. I think that's what Jesus meant. All things are possible when we believe, when we're open, when we're ready to receive it. This resurrecting power of God is at work in us, in our lives, all the time. No exceptions. I was looking again at an inspiring TED Talk by Jill Bolte Taylor. I bet some of you have seen it. She wrote a book called My Stroke of Insight. Anybody read it? Oh, if not, read her book or catch her like 18-minute talk about what she experienced. She had a stroke, and she was a brain scientist. Her background was in neurology and brain science. And so for that to happen to a scientist was pretty amazing. In fact, she even said, this is so cool in the midst of the stroke. I mean, she was able to track exactly what was going on as she progressively lost function, lost the ability to move, to think cognitively. Her brain went silent. All the chatter is on the left side of the brain, apparently. The right side is silent. She said essentially she became an infant in the body of a woman. And this was over the course of 45 minutes to an hour, happening very quickly one morning. But she was able finally to make a call, a great labor. But what she discovered from this trauma, from this medical problem that arose, was that there's this whole other side to the brain that she had not experienced. Even as a brain scientist, she had no idea I remember remembering years ago, they were talking about when my mother had a medical problem about the dark side of the brain. There's so much we don't know about that side of the brain. And what she found there was nirvana, she called it. Silence, peace, presence in the moment. That whole linear thing of being in the past or the future was gone. It was now. It was a sense of connection to everybody, to life, a sense of energy flowing through all of us and among us. She said it was like nirvana. And during her recovery process, she really began to reflect on that. And she said she pictured a world filled with beautiful, compassionate, loving people who were able to step into that space and feel that deep connection among all of us and to feel that peace among us. And she said the idea that people could learn to purposely choose to step into that space, to step to the right of their left hemisphere and feel that peace and that unifying energy, that was something, that was the stroke of insight, that was really something worth sharing. And she said that's what motivated her recovery. It took 8 years, her full recovery, but she emerged from it out the other side, no more than what she was before, a working brain scientist doing research. Now she has this new life that she's also speaking and sharing, and she wrote a book. She's much in demand as a public speaker. She's sharing this empowering message with others about how to claim peace, how to experience more energy and peace and joy in your lives by stepping into that deeper awareness of who we are, that we're connected with one another. It made me think again of Nepo's phrase about whatever opened her, which was a stroke, was much less important than what it opened within her. This powerful new understanding of who we are as human beings, that we're divinely connected. There's an energy connecting all of us that's unifying, that's peaceful. I think that's something worth reflecting on in our own lives, that resurrecting power of God. If it can be with people in strokes and in poverty and in grief and in loss and in cancer and whatever the challenges are in our life, that resurrecting power is with us, doing its powerful work in us. All things are possible. All kinds of healing is possible. All kinds of new life is possible, new livelihood, new freedom, new joy. And our job is only to let it happen in us, to believe in it, to be ready to wait for it, to know it's a principle at work in our lives and have our antenna up ready to receive it and follow it. The resurrecting power of God is at work in me now. That's my affirmation this Easter day. The resurrecting power of God is at work in me now. Want to affirm that with me? The resurrecting power of God is at work in me now. Let's take that into prayer for a moment and affirm that deep truth deep in our hearts and minds. That resurrecting power of God is with us now, as it always has been, as it always will be, whatever the circumstances we face, whatever the challenges. However deep the darkness or the confusion, there is this power with us that will guide us through, that will open up new possibilities for us, and will lead us forward in the path of life. How grateful we are for the power of God within and all around us. So it is. Amen.